working together. President Trump partnering with moderate Democrats on health care, building the wall. The Attorney General for Texas tells us what his role will be in President Trump's immigration crackdown. Pope Francis in Milan. The Holy Father says Mass for 1 million faithful. And celebrating the life of Mother Angelica.
She was a witness of hope.
From Alabama to the Vatican, thousands pay tribute to the foundress of EWTN 1 year after her death. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, March 27th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump's aides opened the door to working with moderate Democrats on health care reform. That's leading to questions about what will happen to federal funding for Planned Parenthood and abortion. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has more. Jason?
Lauren, President Trump is moving on after the Republican health care bill imploded last week. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is offering to find common ground. But what lies in the balance is a campaign promise to defund Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider.
President Trump takes aim at conservatives, tweeting, "Democrats are smiling in D.C. that the Freedom Caucus, with the help of Club for Growth and Heritage, have saved Planned Parenthood and Obamacare." The House Freedom Caucus opposed the bill to dismantle Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year. The group's leader, Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina, tells ABC it's incumbent upon these two groups, the conservatives and the moderates, to come together, hopefully in the coming days, to find consensus. But it's too late for Congressman Ted Poe of Texas. He's leaving the conservative coalition.
That we had the chance to lead, to fulfill the number one promise that Republicans had to repeal Obamacare.
Trump aides say the president could work with moderate Democrats on upcoming legislative battles, something the president himself suggested on Friday.
You know, both parties can get together and do real health care. That's the best thing.
Marjorie Dannenfelser is the president of the Susan B. Anthony List, a pro-life group that helps elect lawmakers. Her group is still pushing Congress to defund Planned Parenthood.
We were very disappointed about that vote. To quote Winston Churchill, when you give up, never, 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 never. That is our biggest message to the White House, to the Senate, and the House.
Dannenfelser says there are two ways to soon defund Planned Parenthood. One is to use the special process that collapsed on Friday, budget reconciliation, which only requires a simple majority in the Senate. The other option is attaching it to a must-pass spending bill that requires 60 votes in the Senate. Lauren?
What's next, Jason? What can we expect from the GOP and the president?
Well, the White House today, the press secretary Sean Spicer said that this last vehicle, which collapsed on Friday, was one way to defund Planned Parenthood, but he says they're also looking at other legislative avenues to pursue that goal.
Correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. President Trump is putting his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, at the helm of a newly unveiled office called the White House Office of American Innovation. It will focus on modernizing the technology of every federal department. It's all part of the outside the Beltway family approach. Jared Kushner, a senior advisor to President Trump, and his son-in-law will run a new White House office aimed at overhauling government. He's using ideas from the business world.
It's my pleasure to welcome such incredible women, including my daughter.
Trump's daughter Ivanka, who is married to Kushner, took part in a roundtable with the president and female small business owners. She has a West Wing office, but no official job. Also today, the White House confirms Kushner is willing to answer questions about arranging meetings with the Russian ambassador and other officials. This comes as the Senate investigates ties between Trump associates and the Kremlin. A member of the House Intelligence Panel says so far there's no evidence.
During a transition, it's not unusual for members of a transition team or an incoming administration to meet with foreign officials during that time period.
The White House notes Kushner was the main contact with foreign governments throughout the 2016 presidential campaign and transition.
He met with countless individuals. That was part of his job. That was part of his role. And he executed it completely as he was supposed to.
Kushner will report directly to the president. The Trump administration demands an end to sanctuary cities, which shelter people living in the country illegally by refusing to help the federal government enforce immigration laws.
And as we continue to ensure that monies that go for law enforcement only go to cities who are participating in an effective, collegial, cooperative way with the federal government, that would also send a message.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions says cities will lose Justice Department grant money if they don't comply with immigration laws. The Obama administration had a similar policy in place but didn't enforce it. The Archdiocese of Mexico says any Mexican company wanting to work on the border wall is betraying their country. An editorial printed yesterday says Mexican companies have expressed interest in helping to build the wall. The church and the Mexican government both have spoken out against it. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed an amicus brief today supporting President Trump's revised executive order on immigration. The filing states the president's new order is grounded in national security concerns and classifies aliens according to nationality, not religion. 11 other states' attorney general and the governor of Mississippi joined the brief. Joining us now is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You're here because you're on a congressional panel, is that correct?
That's correct, on health insurance and Obamacare. So we're just discussing with congressmen where we go from here.
Okay, you contend, based on this immigration order, that it is legal given his power over foreign affairs and national security. But judges in Hawaii and Maryland, they all say something else. Your amicus brief, friend of the court, it provides arguments that the court might want to consider. What impact do you think this is going to have?
So we're hopeful that the court will actually look at the law, because we specifically cite statute, federal law, where Congress gave the authority to the president to restrict the entry of any class of aliens that he determines is detrimental to the country. And so he has explicit authority under federal law. We feel like the court's focused on religion and constitutional law that doesn't apply to non-resident aliens.
I thought what was interesting that you said is that it's religion. It is not about religion, but it is about being an alien.
It's about nationality. So it's the 6 countries that were explicitly mentioned by the Obama administration, also by Congress, when they were dealing with the visa program. So what this administration is doing is just relying on the very same class status that previous administration relied on.
But even if you file this friend of the court brief, what's going to happen?
Hey, we don't know. We're just hoping. We just want the argument out there that this needs to be based on federal law, not a new constitutional right given to people who don't live in our country, have never been here. They don't satisfy constitutional protection, and so we want to make sure the court gets it right.
Okay. You believe that the executive order could fix the vetting process. You've said we have a big problem with that. How would it do that?
So we have been concerned for several years about refugees coming from countries that have activity with terrorism, and so we're concerned because we don't know who's coming into our state, and we have no way of vetting, and so we've encouraged the federal government, if you're going to bring people into our state, we're happy to help. We're happy to be involved, but we're very concerned about having people in our state that we don't know anything about that potentially come in with terrorist ties.
Well, you're right on the border with Mexico. What difference would the executive order make specifically in Texas?
Well, so we've had many Syrian refugees come in. We've probably relocated more Syrian refugees than any other state, and that's been where our concern has been. Not so much the Mexican question is a whole different issue. This is dealing with countries that have a history of terrorism, and we're asking our federal government, please protect our citizens. If at the very least, let us know who you're sending to our state so that we can protect them.
We just heard that the Archdiocese in Mexico is basically saying, do not work on that wall. Mexicans are being told not to do that. What role would Texas play in building this wall?
So we don't have a specific role. Now, you'll notice, and many people don't know this, we already have a wall in El Paso. And that wall has made a significant difference. El Paso is one of the safest cities, if not the safest city in America. It has been for years. Before that wall was built between Juarez, which has a history of high crime, there was a lot of crime, and so it has made a difference. And so the benefit to our state is reducing crime, reducing drug cartel threats, and potentially preventing a lot of bad activity.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me in. I appreciate it.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. A Russian opposition leader must spend 15 days in jail after organizing nationwide protests. Tens of thousands of anti-corruption protesters took to the streets across Russia yesterday in the biggest show of defiance since 2012. The demonstrators were inspired by Alexei Navalny, who was immediately arrested for resisting police orders. The human rights group says more than 1,000 others were jailed. The Vatican's ambassador to Syria says if you don't believe in hell, you should come to Syria.
Chi non crede nell'inferno, basta che venga lì e lì si rende conto che cos'è l'inferno.
Cardinal Mario Zanari gave remarks at a special mass in Rome. He called the situation in Syria a horrible war and added the international community has seen what's going on but has done nothing. EWTN viewers join us in remembering our foundress, Mother Mary Angelica. She died 1 year ago, leaving a legacy that spans the globe. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin begins our coverage from Rome.
Lauren, addressing a packed chapel in St. Peter's Basilica this afternoon, Archbishop Rino Fisichella, who is in charge of the Vatican's Office for the New Evangelization, recalled the life of Mother Angelica and said EWTN is not just a television, it's a consequence of her meeting with Christ.
She encountered Jesus Christ in her life. And for this reason, she consecrated all his life to Christ.
Celebrating the Mass with him was the former director of the Holy See Press Office, Father Federico Lombardi, along with other officials from the Curia, diplomats and journalists, and there were also many friends of EWTN. After the Mass, I asked Archbishop Fisichella how mothers dream of EWTN, which is now the world's largest religious media outlet, is helpful to the Church's mission.
Mother Angelica, she was a new evangelist. She did, in concrete, a new evangelization.
Lauren, living here for many years, I can certainly speak to the network's impact worldwide. And it's funny because the letters EWTN may not translate easily into various languages, but you can still say Mother Angelica and everyone knows exactly who you were talking about. And we have to remember she had a great relationship with the Vatican. She met with John Paul II on a number of occasions, and he once said of her, Mother Angelica, weak in body, strong in spirit, towards the last years of her life. Benedict XVI awarded Mother Angelica with the highest papal award, the Pro Ecclesia et Pontifice, in 2009. And he said just last December that she was a great woman. We also know the great respect that Pope Francis has for her. He offered a special blessing for the repose of her soul during his general audience in March of last year, just after her passing. Lauren?
Thank you so much, Mary Shevlin. From the Vatican to Mother's resting place in Hanceville, Alabama, the Bishop of Birmingham, Robert Baker, celebrated a memorial mass for Mother Angelica today. Bishop Baker started Mass remembering the impact Mother made.
We know the messages of Mother Angelica and her teachings throughout her life resonated well with hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world.
Mass was concelebrated with the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word, an order created by Mother Angelica in the 1980s. EWTN Chairman and CEO Michael Warsaw says Mother Angelica, quote, has had an enormous impact on people throughout the world, and adds, we know from the many, many messages, letters, and correspondence the network receives daily, attesting to the ways in which Mother and EWTN have touched people's lives.
He said, what are you going to build? I said, a television studio. He said, oh, what? I said, television studio. We did.
And yes, she did. We're still here, and we are going strong. That was Mother Angelica describing the very beginning of EWTN. You can read more about our beginning in the National Catholic Register. Just go to ncregister.com. Coming up, we'll take you to Iraq, where an investigation into a deadly U.S. airstrike is taking place. And an update on Christian persecution in that region. The U.S. admits it's responsible for an airstrike in Mosul, Iraq, that reportedly killed at least 100 civilians. Iraqi security forces requested the airstrike in an attempt to attack ISIS fighters and equipment. It is not clear why civilians died instead. The U.S. has launched an investigation. According to the Archdiocese of Erbil in Iraq, before the 2003 U.S. invasion, 1.4 million Christians called Iraq home. Today, there are about 250,000 Christians left there. Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, joins us now for an update. Nina, thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
New information out today. Recent survey, 41% of families who fled the Nineveh Plains, which is in the north, for Erbil, a little bit farther south, is this right, said they would like to return home. And in 2016, 4% said that they wanted to return home.
They were victims of ISIS genocide. They are the survivors, the genocide survivors. They're now seeing their lands in Nineveh become liberated with the help of the coalition, or thanks to the coalition. And so now they can envision actually going back, but they're going to need a lot of help.
Well, how likely is it that they're going to go back?
Well, they're not going to be able to go back unless they have two things. One is security or stability, and an ability to recover through aid and assistance and help. They're going to need help. They're going to need help from their own government, which is a wealthy government. They have a lot of oil over there. They're also going to need help from the United States.
What does our UN ambassador need to do to help get these families that kind of help and to get them safely home?
The UN has been extremely cruel to this community. They have denied them aid, humanitarian aid, and reconstruction assistance programs. The U.S. ambassador, Nikki Haley, has to be extremely firm with the UN, or we have to do it ourselves. She has been a bold voice in calling out the UN on its discrimination against Israel. She has to do the same thing now for Christians.
But what doesn't make sense to me is that President Trump, like his predecessor, President Obama, has acknowledged genocide of these persecuted Christians. But you say that there's a danger that these Christian areas are going to be omitted from UN reconstruction plans. How can that be?
The UN has consistently marginalized them and allowed them to fall through the cracks, whether it's the humanitarian aid programs or the reconstruction aid programs, or in the UN refugee camps. The Christians and Yazidis, another genocide minority, cannot go into those camps because they're not safe for them. So there's been the Archdiocese of Erbil, which cares for most of the Christians of Iraq that survived ISIS genocide, so that it has received no aid at all from the U.S. or the UN in 2.5 years, except for a few tarps.
And there's a camp there that has about 6,000 people in it. I understand they've been there for a very long time.
They have they're overseeing the care of 90,000 Christians in both Erbil and in other places in Kurdistan. And these people have been put at the back of the aid line by the UN. It's been quite deliberate.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for that update. Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute.
Thank you, Lauren.
As Britain prepares to leave the European Union, the remaining nations renew their vows for continued unity during a meeting in Rome. 27 nations marked the 60th anniversary of their founding treaty in Rome over the weekend. The leaders joined together to show their commitment to each other and to talk about the future. The summit comes as British Prime Minister Theresa May will officially trigger Brexit this week. Up next, Dr. Gracie Christie joins us with her take on the key to juggling family and work.
Sometimes we don't succeed fully as well as we'd like at home or at work when we're trying to balance both things.
And the Pope on the move. The Holy Father draws 1 million faithful to Mass in Milan. Today, President Donald Trump told a group of female business owners that backing them is on his list of priorities. Joining us now is Dr. Gracie Christie, Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association. You are also a radiologist and a mother of 5. Talk about a busy life. Welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
Last week, if you aren't busy enough, you spoke at the United Nations. They had an Empowerment of Women conference. Now, in your talk, you discussed the challenges, which I can also relate to, of balancing work and family, and you said the key is humility. What do you mean?
Well, you know, many times when we women are in the workforce, especially in demanding professions like yours, for instance, we have to have a lot of humility in the way we We think about ourselves. Sometimes we don't succeed fully as well as we'd like at home or at work when we're trying to balance both things. And we also have to ask for the people at work to remember the fullness of our femininity includes our motherhood and our wifehood, and to give us time for those things in our lives.
That's very important to me, too, here at EWTN, where I really want it to be family-focused and have us be able to get out and home to our children. You talk so eloquently about the power of motherhood and the importance for you working outside the home and balancing work and family. But there are a lot of women who also stay home and who also have to balance that, plus keeping their own life and having something for themselves. How does balance work?
I think the point of my talk at the UN was that we bring to our work, we bring to this life-work balance, we bring to it our femininity, the things that make us special and distinct from men. And if we are true to the fullness of our femininity, then we put all these things, we prioritize them in our lives, and then we're able to find a balance that makes sense to all the way we order the loves of our lives, whether it's work, our husbands, our children, and we make a success of the balance in that way.
Gracie Christie, you spoke at the UN conference and you quoted John Paul II. Let's listen.
Work is a good thing for men and women. It is good not only in the sense that it is useful, but good in that it corresponds to our dignity, expresses it, and helps us grow in correspondence with it.
Tell us what you meant by that.
I mean that work itself is a wonderful thing. It makes us grow as people. It develops our virtues. It connects us to other people. And in order for that to be really good for women, we also have to remember that we're not men, we're women, and we have special strengths and special moral strengths, especially a special openness to life and an acceptance of other human beings. So we can bring all those factors together and make of our work an excellent thing.
Dr. Gracie Christie, Policy Advisor for the Catholic Association, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. It's always a pleasure.
The Holy Father urges compassion for the poor during a one-day trip to Milan, Italy. It's the 5th papal visit to the city, including 2 by Pope John Paul II and 1 by Pope Benedict XVI. A Muslim man and his family welcome Pope Francis at the start of his busy one-day trip. The family lives in a high-rise building in a poor neighborhood. The Pope shook hands and posed for pictures. A young child gave him a drawing. Another family invited the Holy Father inside their home. He took a call from a sick family member in the hospital who missed the once-in-a-lifetime meeting.
Buongiorno. Come sta?
But it didn't stop her from receiving the Pope's blessing. The Pope continued his focus on the marginalized as he visited Milan's main prison for lunch. Inmates held signs reading, "Thank you, Father." 1 million people packed into a park north of Milan when the Holy Father celebrated Mass. And a rock star welcome for the Pope at Milan's soccer stadium. He spoke to young people who received the sacrament of confirmation this year. Pope Francis issued a harsh criticism of bullying in schools and asked the group to promise him and Jesus never to bully others. To read more about the Holy Father's visit in detail, visit our news partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, that does it for us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for behind-the-scenes looks at News Nightly. I'll see you again tomorrow. Good night, and God bless.